Simon says subscribe and click on the bell icon to receive notifications.
We get to explore Excel charts and not just standard charts. We're going to create some really cool, modern looking charts using a variety of different techniques. So you're going to get to see a lot of different skills and some of those lesser known chart options. And I will preface this by saying the first chart that we're going to create is reasonably complicated. So I'm going to go through it at a slow pace so that you can understand what's going on. My name is Deborah Ashby. I'm a Microsoft instructor and Microsoft MVP who absolutely loves Excel. And I've been training and supporting Excel and other Microsoft products for over 25 years. So I'm going to be your host. I'm going to give you a bit of just an introduction to charts for those of you who aren't that familiar. We're going to take a look at or discuss briefly standard Excel charts versus modern Excel charts. We're going to run through some basic charting best practices, which are always good to know before you even begin building any kind of charts. And then we're going to jump into some chart building skills. And the charts we're going to build are not your standard average charts. So they're going to look a lot more modern than just your bog standard charts that you'll find in Excel. And this first chart, I didn't even know what to call this because I don't think it has a name. So I've gone with multi-series dumbbell chart. Somebody else suggested a sliding dot chart to me earlier. One of those two, I don't know what the name of it is, but it is pretty cool. So we're going to take a look at that first of all. That is the most complex one, so I thought we'd get that out the way first. We're going to take a look at an alternative bar chart. I'm going to show you ways of creating dynamic charts actually using functions as opposed to the charts option. These are pretty good. We're going to take a look at a donut chart, but a donut chart on steroids, just a way that you can make your donut charts look a lot more interesting and interactive. And then at the end, we're going to take a look at a line chart because those are really common. But I'm just going to show you a couple of things that I like to do to my line charts just to, again, just make them look a little bit more modern and bring them into 2024. So let's start out by talking about standard Excel charts. Now, most of us, if we've been using Excel for any period of time, we've probably inserted a chart or two into our spreadsheets. And you can see here on the screen, I've just got some screenshots of common charts that you might insert. Now, I've done a little bit of formatting to these charts, but these are basically just what you get if you were to select a data set and click on area chart or line chart or pie chart or bar chart. This is kind of what you'd get. I formatted them slightly, but this is kind of what you get. Now, these are absolutely fine. They're nice and clear. They're easy to understand. And don't think that I'm saying that you shouldn't use these charts anymore. You absolutely can. That's fine. But what we want to do is just really show you and expand your mind when it comes to visualizations and just show you some of the things that are possible and some techniques that you can use to bring your charts into 2024. Now, when we're talking about modern charts, this is kind of what springs into my mind. And you might note or you might recognize where these screenshots are from. These are from The Economist's website. And The Economist does charts brilliantly. They always have really awesome charts. They're really clean looking and they tell the story of your data in a really good way. And I'm a big fan of all the charts that you find on The Economist website. Even somewhere like McKinsey, they also do amazing charts to show different types of data. And this is what I would consider to be more modern chart design. Now, we're not going to get into anything particularly this complex, but what I'm trying to say to you is if you are looking for ideas, these are two really good websites to go to because you can just see all of the different types of charts they can create. So these don't look like your standard Excel charts. So we're going to kind of do a halfway house here, and I'm just going to show you ways to modernize the Excel charts. Let's take a look at some charting best practices because not all charts are created equally. Now, when you're thinking about representing your data in a chart, the key here is to keep your charts as simple as possible. Now, when I say as simple as possible, I don't mean boring. You can have what appears to be a nice, simple, clear chart, but it could be quite complex to construct. So this screenshot just here, this is what we're actually going to build in the first part. And I thought this was quite appropriate. I actually saw this on the Economist website the other day, and it was a very small thumbnail, and I was trying to get to look at it, but I don't have a subscription to the Economist, so I can't see all the charts in large. They also don't tell you how to put these charts together. So I was just going off of a screenshot and I thought, that's really good. I'm going to recreate that. And this is based on the Euro Championships, which are currently going on. And as I mentioned, right now, England and Denmark are currently playing. So this is a chart that represents the top 10 teams in the Euros tournament by win probability. And you can see here, it's really clear. We have the names of the countries down the left-hand side. We have percentages running across the bottom from 0 to 100%. And then you can see win, final, semi-final, quarter-final, and last 16 at the top. And the probability that each of those countries is going to make it to that stage of the tournament. And I really love this chart. I think it really highlights the data well, and it's interesting. So this, when you look at it, is a simple chart to understand, but the building of this is complex, okay? As I said, we are going to build this first of all. Another thing that's really important is that you choose the right chart type for your data. Not all charts are created equally. And a good example of this would be the pie chart. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of pie charts at all. And that is because pie charts are only really good for displaying smaller data sets. So if you're trying to do a comparison between male versus female, they're good for things like that. But if you've got a lot of data points, then the segments end up really, really small. So they're not great for large amounts of data points. So once you've chosen the right chart type, depending on what your data is, then you need to make sure that there's a quick interpretation of the metrics. So the general rule is that when people look at your chart, they should be able to decipher what it's saying within 10 seconds. So it shouldn't take them any longer than that to work out what you're displaying on your chart. So keep it simple and keep it clear. Be mindful of your chart design. So we all love a well-designed chart, and how you use color and chart elements really matters. Again, anything that you add into your chart should really be there to highlight the actual data as opposed to distract from it. So always be wary of that, and functionality should always trump design. So if you're trying to make a decision between the functionality of the chart and the data that you can see and a design choice, always go for functionality. And then finally, be creative. Your charts don't need to be boring. You are not stuck with just the standard column and the standard bar chart in Excel. Make them interesting, make them engaging. Okay, so those are just some of my favorite charting best practices. This is the first chart that we're going to build. Now, what I've also put the instructions in this gray box down here, or just some pointers, because there are so many steps to this. I thought, you're never going to remember them unless you practice this a lot. It's very hard to remember all of these steps. So I added the steps in there. You have the workbook, you can follow through. It's going to be a little bit easier for you. So how do we build something that looks like this? Well, let's take a look at this chart first of all. What do we have on here? Well, this is actually a combination of two different charts. We've got a bar chart, and that is the gray bars that you can see running for each country horizontally. And then we have a scatter plot over the top. And the scatter plot is what is creating the dots that you can see just here. All right. So we've got two charts laid on top of each other, and we have to do a few different things to get it to this stage. So let's go to our workbook, the empty one, and let's start to build it. So this is our data. We've got our teams running down the left-hand side. And then we have the probability that the team is going to make it to the last 16, the quarterfinals, the semifinals, the finals, and then the probability that they're going to win. Okay, so this is the data that we want to represent in that chart. Now you'll also see I've got 3 empty columns here with grey headings, and these are what we call helper columns. And helper columns, we add those in when we need to do some kind of calculation and bring it into the chart. So these aren't going to be part of our actual data set, but we need to have columns to do some calculations. So I've already put those in there. Now, the first thing that we need to do is we just need to build the bones of this chart. And if you recall, I said that the foundation is basically a bar chart because each country has a horizontal grey bar. The grey bar is 100% of the width of the chart. So the first thing I want to do here is make sure that we have a column which represents 100%. Okay, so in this percent column, I'm going to type in 100%. And we're just going to drag it down so that we have 100% in every single row. And what we're basically going to do is build a bar chart, but we're only going to use the team column and this percent column. So I'm going to hold down Control to select this column as well. Let's go to Insert, and then in the Charts group, we need to select Bar Chart. So we're going to click the drop down next to Column Chart, and this is where you're going to find not only your columns, but also your bars. And a bar chart is basically a column chart, but just running the other way. So we're going to insert a quick bar chart, like so, and you can see what that looks like. Now we need to do a little bit of formatting to this chart, because the first thing you might notice is if we take a look at the team names, which are running down our axes here, can you see that they're reversed compared to the data set? So in the chart, we've got Denmark at the top, whereas in the actual table of data, we've got Denmark at the bottom. And you'll probably notice this when you're working with bar charts. It always does this. It always reverses them. And I find this really annoying, but it's not a problem because we can reverse the categories ourselves. So with the teams selected, you can either right-click and go into Format Axes, or you can press Control-1 on your keyboard. And that's going to open up the Format Axes pane on the right-hand side. Now, in this Format Axes pane, we've got our axes options. And if you go down to the 3/4 of the way down, notice just here we have categories in reverse order. So if I click on this, it's going to switch those teams around. So now we have France at the top and Denmark at the bottom. But what you'll also notice is that when we switch them around, it moves that horizontal axis to above the chart, which again, we don't really want. So a way to counteract that is go to the Format Axes area again, and under Axes Options, where we have horizontal axes crosses, choose at maximum category, and it's going to put it back down to the bottom. Okay, so that's sort of a nice quick way to reorder those teams so that they match your table. The next thing I might want to format here is this axis down here, because if you recall, this data that we're using is just this column data, the percentage. So where we had 100% in every single row, that's what we're currently displaying in this bar chart. But you can see that the chart axis goes up to 120%. And you'll find this again with Excel charts. They'll always give you a little bit more room at the end. Now, in this particular scenario, I want these bars to run all the way to the end. So I want to change or modify this axis. So what we're going to do is, again, go to our axes options. And where we have our bounds, minimum and maximum, can you see the minimum bound is 0, which is fine because we're starting at 0%. But the maximum is 1.2, so effectively 120%. So all we would need to do here is change this to 1, press enter, and you can see it's modified that horizontal axis. So now we have 0 to 100%, and all of the bars are the full width across. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to make each of these bars a little bit wider by adjusting the gap width. So if you ever want to make bars in either a bar or a column chart a bit wider, you don't make the bar wider, you effectively make the gap in between each bar smaller. So we're going to select the bars, and then in the pane on the right-hand side, if you leave this pane open, it's going to take you to the correct place. Notice we have a gap width slider, and currently it's at 182%. So I'm going to change mine to 80. And that's going to make those bars or make them look like they're wider because we've decreased that gap width. And just a final little touch here, I'm going to change the color of these bars. Let's go to the Format tab. And we're going to fill these with a light grey color. And I'm just going to choose the lightest grey just there. So we've got the start of our chart happening here. Now let's make it a bit bigger, like so. So this is a good start. We're going to overlay our scatter plot onto this a bit later on, okay? But now we've got the bare bones of this chart. So if we want to overlay a scatter plot, we need to have some data to work with first. So what we're going to do is we're going to just select some data from our table and get it into the chart so that we can convert it into a scatter plot. Now, it doesn't matter which series of data you choose. You could choose the last 16 data, you could choose quarterfinals, you could choose semifinals, you can choose whatever you like. I'm going to go with last 16. And a quick way of getting this information into the chart is to copy, Control-C, click on the chart, Control-V to paste it in. Now it's going to paste it in as another bar. Now what we effectively want to do here is we want to change the bar that we've just pasted in, this orange one, to a scatter plot. So if we select it, right-click, change series chart type. And this will automatically jump you to the combo chart area. Now, a combo chart is basically just when we're combining two charts or using two different charts to represent two different series of data. So you can see at the bottom here, currently, the percentages, which remember are all 100% at the moment, are showing as a clustered bar. And the last 16 data I just added is also showing as a clustered bar. Now, we don't want the last 16 data to show as a clustered bar. We want it to show as a scatter plot. So we're going to scroll down and we're going to choose scatter plot and click on OK. Now, what you should see is just one dot on this chart, and that is it just there. Because what we've been doing, or what these values in this table are going to do, the ones for last 16, quarterfinals, semifinals, finals, and win, these values are going to tell Excel where on the horizontal axis we want the dot placed. And in a moment, we're going to add some values for the y-axis so that Excel knows how high up this y-axis the dot needs to be placed. So this is very much about positioning when you're working with a scatter plot, X, Y axes. So we've got one dot on here so far. Again, I want to make a couple of changes to this axis before we continue. So notice on the right-hand side here, where we have our vertical axes, this is showing as a percentage. Now, I don't want these to show as a percentage. I want them to show as a number. So I'm going to select the axes. We're going to go across to our axes options and expand them out. And all the way at the bottom, we should have number. Let's expand number. And you can see in here, this axis is showing in percentage format. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to number. I'm just going to increase the decimal places to 1. So now we have an axis that runs from 0 to 1.2. Now, I don't want it to run from 0 to 1.2. What I want to plot down here, or what I want this to show, is I need this axis to help me work out the Y position of the dots. Okay, and this is quite hard to explain. So if this is sort of sounding a little bit complicated, I completely understand. You're probably going to need to go through this a little bit slower on your own. But we need to work out, we need to have an axis which is going to allow us to define where this dot gets placed. All right. So what we want to do, first of all, is we want to add in some values for our y-axis, because how far along this grey bar the dot is going to be placed is going to be generated by the values that we have in here. Whereas the y-axis, we don't have any information as yet. Now, the way that I'm going to calculate this is I'm going to take a look at how many teams I have. So if I take a look at the count in the status bar, I can see that I have 10 teams. So I'm going to double that to 20. And in the y-axis column, I'm going to put 20 in here. I'm then going to go down by 2 each time. So we're going to go 20, 18, 16. And if you've got a few in there, you should then be able to copy that pattern down. We're going to go all the way down to 2. You might be thinking, why on earth is she doing this? It'll all become clear in a moment. So we've got some y-axis values in here. Let's go back to this axis just here, because what we want to do is we want to change the bounds. Okay, so underneath axis options, we want the minimum to be 0, but now I want the maximum value to be the maximum value in our y-axis column. So I'm going to change this to 20. So it looks something like that. So now we have a y-axis that's going down by 2 each time, 20, 18, 16, 14. I actually want to display those middle values as well. So I want 19, 17 in there too. So underneath where we have units, major is currently set to 2. So if we change this to 1, it's going to give us those. Now, the reason why we've done it this way is because if we want our dot to appear in the correct position exactly in the middle of this grey bar, can you see now we have 19 is in the middle of that first grey bar. 17 is in the middle of this grey bar. All right. By using this method, we've managed to get it so that our dot is going to be exactly in the middle of the grey bar. So now that we have our structure, it's time to add in our data points. Now, if you recall, when we first built this chart, we added 1 dot down here and we used the last 16 data. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click and we're going to go to select data. Now in here we can see percent and last 16. So these are the current series that are in play in this chart currently. All right. Now the last 16, let's click on edit, because that was the one we kind of used when we were first building this chart. So we're going to reinsert this so that it looks a little bit better. So where we have series name at the top here, this is just the name of the series. So this is last 16. So we're just going to click the cell that contains the last 16 label. For the X values, we're going to delete out what's in there, and we're going to choose all of these values. And then the Y values are going to be what we have in here. Okay. Now, as I do that, can you see what's happening to the chart? We now have our dots plotted. Now, they're not in exactly the correct position at the moment. They need to be shifted down a little bit, but they're roughly in the right position. Okay. Let's click on OK. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to add a new series for each of my data points. So the next one, the series name, is quarterfinals. The X values are these values just here. And the Y values are these values. Click on OK. You can see the green dots have now been added. Let's go to the next one. This one's semifinals. We want our X values. And then our Y values are these ones just here. Click on OK. Series name, this one is for the final. We've got our X values, and then we've got our Y values. And then finally, who is most likely to win? So we want our label, we want our X values, and then we want our Y values. And click on OK. So we're slowly getting more towards what we want this to look like. So I have all my dots and their horizontal position is correct. It's based on the data. All right. Now the vertical position, the y-axis position, isn't quite right, because we set this up 20 down to 2 in this y-axis column. And that's exactly what you can see on this axis. Can you see we've got 20 at the top and this one goes all the way down to 0. Now I want to move all of these dots down so that this first row are in line with 19. The second row should be in line with 17, so that they're dead in the middle of that grey bar. So all we need to do is adjust our y-axis values to get this to work. So instead of 20, I'm going to have 19 in there. And notice as soon as I press 19, it moves that first row of dots down into the correct position. We can go 17 for the next lot, and then we can just copy these down because it will recognize the pattern. And like magic, those dots are basically now in the correct position relative to the X and Y axes. All right. Now, with these dots, that we do have a final couple of things left to do. We want to join or connect these dots so that it's like a multi-spot dumbbell chart. As I said, I don't know what you would quite call this. Now, the way that we join the dots, we're going to use error bars to join these dots together. And the way that we need to do this is we do need to perform a quick calculation. Because if we take this first bar at the top where we have France, we have our orange dot at the end, which is basically the maximum value. And then the green dot is the minimum value. And that's the same for all of these. The orange dot is always the largest value, and the green dot is always the lowest value. So in order to work out what the difference is between the highest dot and the lowest dot, we need to do a bit of a calculation. So we're going to do that in this column just here where I have bar difference. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to ask Excel to find the maximum value in this range of data. Okay, so it should find 96%. But then I want it to minus the minimum value in this range of data. Hit enter. Now, it doesn't matter if you have percentages just here or decimals, that's fine. And I'm getting this little green warning because it's saying that I haven't included formula omits adjacent cells. So it's saying that I've got a formula, but I haven't included an adjacent cell. Now, that's absolutely fine in this case, so I can ignore that error. So this is the difference between the maximum and the minimum value in each row of my chart. So we can use this information to connect these dots together. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the orange series and click on the top dot, and it's just going to highlight all of those orange dots. And then we're going to click on the plus, and we're going to add an error bar. Now, when you add error bars, it will try and add vertical and horizontal error bars. Now, we're not interested in the vertical error bars. We just want the horizontal. So we can select the vertical ones and press delete. So we've just got these little horizontal error bars. Now, we need to do some formatting to these, and we need to tell Excel how long they need to be. So I'm going to click, and this is easier said than done, on the error bar. And in the Format Error Bars area, we need to make some adjustments just here. So the first thing we want to do is with the direction, we want to say minus because we don't want the bar going to the right of the dot. So we want a minus in here. And we're also going to say no cap, which means it's not going to have that little line at the top. And then error amount, this is where we get to define how long the bar is going to be. And this is where we're going to use that calculation that we just did. So we're going to go to custom and specify values. Now for both positive and negative, we're going to use the same data set. So we want this data set just here in both positive and negative. Click on OK. Check out what we have. We now have them all linked together. And this is all completely dynamic because of the way that we've built it. So, for example, if you take a look at France, let's just do the top one, just so you can see the difference. I want to do the win. Let's do 50% there. There we go. You can see that everything updates. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now, at this stage, we don't need this axis on the right-hand side. So we can just simply delete that out. So then with this chart, you can take it, you can do whatever you like with it. You could add a chart title, you could maybe copy and paste it onto some kind of dashboard. And it's just a really nice way of representing your data. All right, so quite a complicated chart. I did warn you at the beginning that this was going to be a complicated chart with a lot of different techniques in there. But what I'm hoping to do in this lesson is just show you the possibilities when it comes to charting and maybe show you some things that you didn't know.
Hi, from everyone at Simon Says It. We hope you're enjoying this training lesson. Please like this video to show your support for the channel. If you want to take your learning further, earn a certificate for this course, and gain access to over 200 courses ad-free, click up there and go to simonsaysit.com. Thanks for watching, and back to the course.
let's take a look at something that you might use more frequently, and that is what I like to call the alternative bar chart. So for this one, we have a very small set of data. So we just have the breakdown of eye colors for males and females at a specific company. And we want to display this data in a bar chart. So let's select the data. Let's go up to Insert, click the drop down, and then go to, this time we want this one just here, the 100% stacked bar chart, because that is going to give us this effect just here. So if you just wanted a standard Excel bar chart, that's what this is going to look like when you choose the 100% stacked. Now, once again with this chart, can you see it's reversed the categories? So instead of blue, brown, green, hazel, we've got hazel, green, brown, blue, so on and so forth. So I'm going to change that. Let's click on the axes. Let's go over to Format Axes, Axes Options. There it is, Categories in reverse order to switch those around. Now for this particular chart, we don't actually need to show this axes here. So we don't need these percentages because we're going to add them as data labels. So I'm just going to delete that. And that is the first thing you should do when you're formatting any chart, is get rid of anything that you don't need. So I'm also going to get rid of these grid lines just by pressing delete. I'm going to grab the legend, and this is just a text box. I'm just going to move this up to the top to get it out the way. And that's looking pretty good so far. We could go in and change the colors. Now I'm going to make these a bit lighter, just temporarily. So let's just make them a bit like that. We're going to change them to a different color in a minute, but I want to add some data labels, and I want to make sure that these are easy to see as we're formatting. And I think whilst we're here, let's change the gap width as well. Just make those slightly wider. Now with this first series selected, let's right click and add some data labels. And I'm going to do the same for this blue series. We're going to add data labels. So this is just displaying the value from the table actually on the charts. And if you do that, it means that you can normally delete the axes, which makes your chart look a lot cleaner. Now I want to display these numbers at the end here, at the end of the bar. So this is where, again, we need to format our data labels. So in the pane on the right-hand side, let's click on our label options and expand that group. And right at the bottom, we have label position. So I'm going to say inside end to move those across. Now we can do something similar with these values, but this time I want them inside base. That's kind of the effect that I want. I'm going to make them slightly bigger. So let's increase the font size and maybe make them bold. And I'm also going to change them to white font. Let's do the same with this one. Increase them once, make them bold, white font. And then I'm going to change my chart colors to something a little bit nicer. The reason why I made them pale is so that we could see these data labels as we were formatting them. So let's go to the Format tab, Shape Fill, and I'm just going to make this series red, and we'll make this series, let's make it a darker gray. Okay, so this is looking pretty nice. I'm quite liking how this is looking, but I do want to do something else. So the thing that really differentiates the alternative bar chart from the regular bar chart is the fact that we have dynamic labels and we have them positioned above each bar, which kind of gives this the look and feel as if each bar is a separate chart. So the first thing I'm going to do is delete out this axis just here, because we're going to have these axes labels above each of the bars. Now, in order to do this, we're going to use a text box, and this is a little trick here. You want to make sure that you click on the chart first of all, and then insert your text box. So we're going to click on text box, and then we're going to draw it where we want it to be. And I'll tell you why that's important in a moment, because the first one that we want here is this bar represents everybody with blue eyes. So I'm not going to type in the word blue. I'm going to make sure that I'm clicked on the text box. I'm going to go to the formula bar and we're going to type in equals, and then we're going to select blue from the table and hit enter. And then we're going to move this into the correct position just above. Now, the reason why I told you to click on the chart before inserting the text box is that it means that that text box is going to become part of the chart. So if you pick this chart up and move it around, the text box is going to go with it. If you didn't, or if you were clicked over here, for example, and then you inserted the text box and dragged it over here, if you were to move the chart, the text box wouldn't move with it. So that's a good little tip. Now, I want to add one of these labels for each of the eye colors. So the quickest way to do this is simply to select the text box, hold down Control and drag down, and then you can position. And then we're going to hold down Control, drag down and position, hold down Control, drag down and position. And of course, you can spend a bit more time positioning these than I am. And then we just need to go in and we just need to change the formula. So we're just going to change the cell that we're referencing. So for the second one, instead of blue, we want brown, which is cell A5. So we can just simply update the formula, A5. The next one is going to be A6. And the next one is going to be A7, like so. So again, the way that we've built this makes it dynamic. So if one of these values was to change, it means that the chart is automatically going to update. So if we change hazel to grey and hit enter, you can see that it automatically updates in the chart. All right, so that is what I like to call the alternative bar chart. And before we leave this, the chart title, if you've got a title in your spreadsheet, you can link to that instead of typing it in again. So let's click on the text box, go to the formula bar, equals, select the cell, enter, and it's going to bring that chart title across. And again, because this is linked, if this title was to change, the title of the chart will also change. Okay, so I really like this. I think it's a nice, clean looking chart. Let's move on to the next couple of charts that we're going to build. And these are a little bit different because we build them using a formula as opposed to using an Excel chart. And again, these are really cool because they're all completely dynamic and you can combine them with other things like conditional formatting to make them really functional. So what we have here in this first example is a little table that shows the reasons that people have left an organization, and the percentage of people who said that that was their reason during the exit interview. So I want to put this into a really nice visual. And I'm going to do this using the REPT function. Now, before we get onto the function, the first thing that I want to do is I want to bring all of these labels across to this cell just here. So what we can do, again, is just link. We can type in equals, link to the cell, press enter, and then we can drag down to fill all of those in. Now, this is where I want to build my chart. Now, what I'm going to build here is kind of almost a little bit like a dumbbell chart. It's going to be a line with a circle on the end and then the number. Now, the way that we can do this is we can use the REPT function. So if we type in equals REPT. Now, REPT just stands for repeats. And the arguments that we have for this function is text and number of times. So we can specify a piece of text or a symbol and then the number of times we want to repeat it. So if I want a line, I could say, and everything that you put in as text needs to go within quote marks. So we're going to open a quote mark and then I'm going to add a dash. Now, there's various different ways that you can do this. I quite like to use the Windows symbols. So if you press the Windows key and period or dot, it's going to bring up your Windows emojis and symbols. And if we go to the symbols gallery, you can see under recent, because I've been playing around with this, I have dashes and circles, all different kinds of things in here. So I'm going to choose the dash. That's going to be the symbol I'm going to use. I'm going to close the quote marks. That's what I want to repeat, that dash symbol. And then the number of times I want to repeat it is going to be what we have in cell B5. Now, if I close that and press enter, it's just going to give me a line. What I want is I want a dot on the end of here, okay? And then I also want it to show the value. So we're going to go back in and edit this formula. Let's go to the formula bar, comma. So I want to join it. We need an ampersand in there. I'm going to open another quote mark, and I want to have a dot on the end. Okay, so again, I'm going to go into my Windows symbols, Windows key, period, back to symbols, and you could choose one of these dots. I'm going to choose this one just here, and I want there to be a space after it. So I'm going to press space and put in the quote marks because I then want to join it with the actual value in the cell. Now, when we hit enter, that's what we're going to get. Okay, so just to review that formula, we're repeating the dash 45 times. That's what we have in cell B5. We're joining it with this dot and the space after it, and then we have the value that's in cell B5. So this gives a really nice effect. We can then pull this down, and that's what we get. And the cool thing about this is that you can pretty much use any symbol. This is fun to play around with because you can get all different kinds of effects. And because this is basically text, we can change the color by modifying the font. So if I want these to be in a different color, I would just select them all, go to font, and then you can change them to whatever color you like. So I'm going to make these dark green. Okay. Now just to make this a little bit more attractive, let's add some formatting to this table. I'm going to select all of the data, and then I'm going to add some borders. So let's go into more borders. And I'm just going to add a light grey border that runs across the middle. Click on OK to see how that looks. And then if maybe I want to highlight to my management the top 3 reasons why people leave the company, I might just choose to highlight those in maybe a light green. But very quickly there, we have a really effective, interesting looking chart that is completely dynamic. So if this value was to change to 20, you can see that updates. All right. So I really like REPT for doing things like this. And there's so many different variations of this REPT formula. I'm just going to show you another variation because this one uses, well, it's slightly different, but it uses conditional formatting. So below we have another little table where we have a list of employees and their job rating. So maybe this is their job rating out of 10. Now, once again, we're going to pull across all of the employee names first of all. So we're going to say equals, and we're going to link to this cell. And then we're going to drag down. Now, this time, notice just underneath the table, can you see in cell A25, I have a star symbol in here already. I put it there so you can see how you can basically link to a symbol as opposed to actually typing the symbol or the dash or whatever it is into the formula. So this time, when we're doing our REPT, we're going to say REPT. The text is just going to be this cell just here. Now, because I am going to drag this formula down to copy it down, I want to make sure that this doesn't move. So we need to press F4 to make that cell absolute. Comma, the number of times we want to repeat the star is in relation to the job rating. Close the bracket, hit enter, and if we drag this down, you should see that we get the relevant number of stars. Now, with this, we could also combine this with a little bit of conditional formatting. So maybe we want to highlight in our chart all of the employees who have a job rating of 8 or more. So a really easy and effective way to do this is to select all of the data, like so, and then go to conditional formatting. We're going to create a new rule, and we're going to use a formula. So what we want to say here is we want to say when the job rating is greater than or equal to 8. Now, the way that conditional formatting adds these formulas is it makes them absolute. So you can see that we have a dollar symbol in front of the row and the column. If I was just to leave this as it is, it's not going to work correctly. I'm not going to get the effect that I want. We need to remove the dollar symbol from the row. So we're just locking the column. All right. And then we can choose the formatting that we want to apply. So for any students who score 8 or above, I want the font to be, let's stick with a nice dark green theme. And I want the fill background to be a light grey. Click on OK, click on OK. and you can see what that looks like. And again, this is completely dynamic. So if Emma Scone gets a 9, you can see that the conditional formatting kicks in. She's now in green with a grey fill background. So these are all really cool ways of creating modern charts which are dynamic. Now, there are a ton of different variations using REPT that you can do. I would recommend that you have a little experiment with different symbols and various different things because you can get some really cool effects. I find that with donut charts, people don't really tend to use them to their full capacity. Because if you were just to create a basic donut chart, so let's just say I want to create a chart that shows the revenue for each of these fruits. So if we go to Insert and go to the pie chart drop down, this is where we have our donut chart. Now a donut chart basically looks like a pie with the middle cut out. And I think that's all people think it is. It's just a pie chart with a hole in the middle. But donut charts are a lot more than that, particularly when you start adding in more series of data. Because if we delete this one out, you can see here I have some other series of data. So not only are we showing the revenue, we're showing the profit and also the cost. Now, if I wanted to represent all of this in a donut chart, I need to select all of the data, go to Insert, and down to Donut. And instantly we have something that looks a lot more interesting. And this is sort of what we call, it sort of turns a donut chart into what a lot of people call a racetrack chart because it looks like a racetrack. Now we're going to do a little bit of formatting here. And again, this is just all stuff which I do occasionally, which I think is really effective, particularly if you build dashboards and you're really trying to make your dashboard engaging and interesting. There's some really good techniques in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's Control-1 to open up the format pane. First thing I'm going to do is adjust the donut hole size because it's a little bit large. So let's drag this handle down and make the hole size a bit smaller. We're going to make it about there. Now for this chart, I'm not going to go crazy with the colors. Let's just make it quite monochromatic. So I'm going to go to Chart Design. Let's change the colors. And I'm just going to choose this monochromatic palette like so. You could choose more exciting colors than this. But let's say that my manager is really interested in grapes. And this is the series for grapes. Now, if you're wondering what we're looking at here, we basically have 3 rings, an inner ring, a middle ring, and an outer ring. Now, the outer ring, if we click on it, you can see in the table, the outer ring is showing the cost for each of the fruits. The middle ring is the profit, and the inner ring is showing the revenue. And my manager is interested in the revenue, profit, and cost, but only for grapes. He's obsessed with grapes. So I want to highlight grapes in this little donut chart. So grapes is this section just here where we have the darkest black. If you want to format individual segments, you have to click twice on the segment. If you just click once, it's going to select the entire ring. So any formatting you apply is going to apply to the entire ring. So you need to click again just to make your selection. Okay, and then we're going to go Format, and I'm just going to make this red so it stands out for him. Click once, click twice, red, click once, click twice, red. Okay, so already I'm highlighting to him his favorite fruit, grapes. Also notice that I have a border around the outside of this chart, a very faint border. And again, I would recommend you remove this if you're adding it to dashboards. It looks a lot cleaner. So we just do that by going to Format and removing the shape outline, like so. Okay. Now, what else am I going to do here? Let's remove the chart title. I'm not going to have a chart title at the moment. It's not really particularly obvious looking at this chart, what's revenue, what's profit, what's cost. So I'm going to add some data labels. So let's click on the outer ring, right click, add data labels. Now you can see what happens as soon as we do this. It adds them, but it does look a little bit crowded and messy. It also makes the chart a little bit smaller once you start to add them. So I'm just going to drag that out to make it quite large again. Because in general, I don't really want to display the values on the rings. I just want it to say revenue, profit, and cost so that people know which ring represents what. Now you can change your data labels by formatting them. So if we click on the first set of data labels for the outer ring, go to Format Data Labels and expand our data label options, this is where we can specify what we're showing in our data label. So I've got value selected at the moment, so it's choosing the value from the table. But we can say series name instead and deselect value, and then it's going to show cost. So let's do the same for the rest of these. We're going to show the series name and deselect value. Click on these ones, show the series name, deselect value. So now I'm getting cost, profit, and revenue for every single one of my fruits. Now again, this is overkill. Maybe I only want these listed once and pointing at the ring that they refer to. So this is where we need to go through and delete all of the data labels that we don't need. And this is a little bit tedious. There's no other way around it. Because when we click on cost, again, it's going to select them all. So you have to click on the text box again if you want to just delete the one. So you have to click once, click twice, and we need to do that for whichever ones we want to delete. So I'm going to do it for all of them except one series. I'm only going to leave the ones in the darkest segment at the top there. So we want to select all of these like so. I want to grab the text box and I'm going to move it out. And you can see it has that little leader. So it kind of points out where it goes. So these are now pointing at the different rings that they represent. Okay, I'm going to make those bold. And again, you've got more time to spend formatting these, but that is a much nicer way of showing this data. We could go to town. We could add in pictures around the outside. So again, let me show you another thing that you can do to make your charts look really spectacular by incorporating images. So as I mentioned, my manager is obsessed with grapes. Let's add a picture of grapes in here. I'm going to go to Insert. I'm going to insert a shape first of all. I'm going to do a rounded rectangle. And let's make it about that big. I'm going to remove the shape outline and we're going to fill this with an image of grapes. So in Format Shape, we want to go to Fill and we're going to fill with a picture. Now, picture source. Let's click on Insert. I'm just going to grab one from the stock image library. So let's go for that. And let's search for grapes. And we'll use this one just here. Let's insert it in. Now, when you're inserting images inside shapes, and this is another quick tip, quite often you'll find that they'll sort of look squashed either vertically or horizontally. So always make sure that you resize your images inside the shape. Now you do that by going to Picture Format, going to Crop, and choosing Fill. That will keep the aspect ratio. You can then move it around and position it. I think that needs to go out a little bit. It's a bit of a tight fit. And then click the top half of the crop button. So that just ensures that your image doesn't look squished. Now I'm going to add a little border around the outside. So let's go for picture. I'm going to add a black border, but I don't want it to be that thick. Let's go for weight. I'm going to make that quite thin. And then I'm just going to connect this to the series that it relates to. So let's go to Insert, Shapes, and I'm going to use one of these lines. Let's just go for this one. And I'm just going to point it at what it relates to. And again, let's format this line so it looks a bit nicer. Over to Format Shape, Fill and Line. And this time I'm going to say, I want a solid line. I want it to be black. I'm going to make it thinner. So let's take it down to 0.75. And I'm going to change it to a dash to give it a nice effect. So I could go around this entire chart, add in images. I could even have some text underneath here, adding images that point to the relevant segment of the donut chart. And again, just to finish this off, I might click on the chart, Insert, Text Box, and add something in the middle here because it is sort of a big space that's begging for something. So let's put in fruit sales just to finish it off. These are all sort of styling tips and tricks, things that I do to make my charts look engaging. Here we just have some data related to average rainfall for 3 different cities. So Bangkok, London, and Delhi. And I want to represent this in a line chart. And I will say straight up front, line charts are for time-based data. So data that is going to change over a period of time. So maybe something like if you're trying to plot stock price fluctuations over the 24-hour period, or maybe sales revenue over a period of 10 years. Those would be the types of things that you can plot in a line chart. Must be time-based. So what we're going to do is going to Control A to select our data, go to Insert, and then in Charts, we can select line chart. So we've got 2D line charts at the top here. When it comes to 3D charts, my advice here is just stay away from them. 3D charts are a big no-no because they are just awful. Always stick with your 2D. We have different variations here, so this depends on how you want your chart to look. So I'm just going to do a plain basic one. So there is our bog standard Excel line chart. And then of course we can go in and the rest of it is really formatting. So let me just show you a couple of formatting tricks, things that I like to do. Now, if you have a chart where you have gaps at the top or gaps at the bottom, so quite often your lines will start sort of quite far up. So you might have a bit of a gap at the bottom or a bit of a gap at the top. Like you can see, our last data point is kind of here where we have Bangkok, 300 millimeters of rain. But my chart goes up to 350. So if I want to scale this a little bit better, I could adjust the scale that we're using. So I'm going to select the axes just here, go to axes options, and this is where we can adjust the bounds. So again, this is going from 0 to 350 currently. Our top value is 300, so maybe I want to say, I don't know, 310, something in here. And that's just going to bring it up, and it just removes any blank space that you have at the top. So it's always worth considering looking at those different bounds. Oh, it's gone to -40. Let's do a 0 there, like so. All right, so that's a way to scale your chart properly. Now, something else that I like to do with these is I like to make these lines smoothed. I'm a big fan of a smoothed line chart. So I'm going to click on the first line. We're going to go over to our fill options. And then underneath the line group, if we scroll down, right at the bottom, you have a smooth line checkbox. And when I click this, check it out. We now get a curvy line, which you may have seen people using in different charts. I'm a big fan of these. I think they look great. So we need to do that for every single line. So let's go back to here. We'll do smooth line. And this one as well, we're going to do a smoothed line. And I think those look much more modern and a lot cooler. Another thing that you'll see people doing a lot is creating sort of dark colored dashboard. The dark background theme is very popular when it comes to visualizations and presenting data at the moment. So just to show you a really cool way that you can do this and kind of create like this neon, I don't know, spaghetti chart, I'm going to call it because it looks like spaghetti. Let's go to chart design. And I'm actually going to change this. So we've got a dark background and I'm going to change it to that one. And then I'm going to select this blue line and let's make it stand out a bit. I'm going to go to Format, Shape Outline if we want to change these. And I'm going to make this a pink color. We're going to go for neon just here. Now, another way that you can really make this look neon is by adding a glow shape effect. So if we go back to Shape Effects, Glow, I'm going to add a pink glow. And you can make the glow as big as you like. I'm going to sort of be reasonably subtle with it, but it sort of gives a neon effect. So let's go and do this one. I'm going to make this a bright green. And again, I'm going to add a glow. Let's go for this one and this one. I mean, the orange is pretty good. I'm not going to lie. It's pretty good. Let's go for glow and we'll do this one. So very quickly there, we've created this kind of futuristic neon looking spaghetti / line chart, which again, it just elevates the regular line chart and makes it look a lot more interesting. And these look really effective on dark colored backgrounds or dashboards. So yeah, that was sort of really all I was going to show you is basically this smooth line technique and the glow effect. But line charts, really simple to create. The rest of it, you just insert it and the rest of it is really just formatting.
A big congratulations everyone for making it all the way to the end of this course. So it's just about time for me to sign off and say goodbye to you all. I hope you enjoyed running through this course as much as I've enjoyed teaching it to you. Once again, my name is Deb. Bye for now.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To see the full course that this video came from, click over there. And click over there to see more videos from Simon Says It.